So solving by graphing is fun, obviously. Throw it in your calculator, do the old second calc zeros, and everything's fine. But what if the question asks you to show your work? Solve by factoring. Well, let's go back and look at factoring again and see where that's going to take us. Remember, you've studied a lot of this kind of factoring already in grade 10. You did the greatest common factor where you had something like 2x cubed plus, let's say 8x, and you found out, oh, I can take a 2 and an x out of this and a 2 and an x out of that. So I'm going to go 2x, and I'm going to divide it out to give me an x squared here, and that's going to give me a 4, and everybody's happy, right? Then, remember, we had to solve ones like this, where the a value, that first value, is 1, something like an x squared plus 3x plus 5 kind of idea. Well, we used PSA 1. Now, for those of you who have never had me as a teacher before, this is going to be kind of new to you, but you know what? New, whatever. Okay, it's just a different way to organize things. That's what PSA 1 is all about, and we'll go into that a little bit more. Then you can have another type of factoring where that a is not 1. So it'd be something like, I don't know, 3x squared plus 7x plus 10. And then you'd have to use something called the decomposition method. I call it PSA 2. And if you remember in grade 10, we also had perfect squares. Perfect squares that look like this, x squared plus 6x plus 9. And you know by completing the square how perfect squares work. Then you had something called difference of squares, where this is square rootable and that one's square rootable, and of course there's the difference between them. And the last one that we're going to do is something called the quadratic formula. And you'll get to that when we get to the next podcast for sure. But the most important thing here about this is remembering this. In order to solve, you're going to have to factor first. You have to factor first. Then let these factors equal to 0, and then what you're going to do is you're going to solve for x. Now, you're probably saying, well, how does that work? Well, that's something I'm going to show you in this podcast. We're going to start off by doing a little bit of review, and then I'll go into solving for you here. Okay, so let's go. Bada boom. Here's our first one, and it says now to solve. All right, in order to solve something, again, you have to make the y equals to 0. But do you remember PSA? Sure you do. Remember PSA. There it is. Okay, so my question is, what does P stand for? Remember, P stood for the product. And if you remember when you FOIL something, right, it was the last two terms that were multiplied together that gave you this. So that, in fact, is your product. The S stands for sum. There we go, sum. And if you remember, after you did the FOIL, which was the first, and then you did the outer, and then you did the inner, and then you did the last, you have to remember that it was the outer and the inner that were added together to give you this term. And that's why this is called the sum, 7. So in other words, what you're looking for is you're looking for two numbers that multiply together, that's the product, to give you 12, that add up to 7. Now, some people could do this in their head really quick. I want to take my time on this because I want to show you some really important stuff here. So the product, okay? Look at all the possible products of 12. Well, of course, 1 and 12, but don't forget, you have -1 and -12 too. You can have 2 and 6. Well, that means you can have -2 and -6 as well. You can have 3 and 4. Well, look at this. You can also have -3 and -4. Every one of those adds up to a positive, or multiplies together to give us a positive 12. Now, here's the catch though. It has to add up to give you a positive 7. Well, you look at every one of these, they're all negative. So a negative and a plus a negative is still going to give you a negative, so it's not going to be any one of these. 1 and 12 gives you 13, 2 and 6 here gives you 8, so those two don't work. Your final number, of course, is going to be 3 and 4. So your answer is going to be 3 and 4 adds up to give you the product. 3 times 4, I should say 3 times 4 multiplies together to give you the product. 3 plus 4 adds up to give you the sum. So your A, or your answer, is in fact 3 and 4. Now, sounds like a lot of stuff to do, but you know what? PSA is just a beautiful way of summarizing this. Now, let me show you something which is really, really cool. What do you do with this answer? Well, the answer means that this particular polynomial, now let me erase a lot of this stuff so that we can clean it up and you can actually see it. Okay, this polynomial here, which we let equal to 0, this x squared plus 7x plus 12, the answer here helps us to factor. Okay, this means it's x, this is a plus, so plus 3. This is x, this is a 4, so plus 4. There we go. There's our factorization of this. But here's the important part. Here's the part you didn't do in grade 10. We let this equal to 0 because after all, it is an equation. And what's going to happen is you're going to take each one of these. The x plus 3, you're going to let that equal to 0. You're going to take the x plus 4, you're going to let that equal to 0. And now you're just going to solve for x. Subtract the 3 from both sides, and lo and behold, x equals to minus 3. Same thing with this one. You subtract the 4 from both sides, and lo and behold, x equals to minus 4. So guess what? Those are your solutions. Minus 3 and minus 4 are your solutions. So what does this mean? Well, this means now you can accurately graph this. Look at this. That's minus 3, that's minus 4. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. That means at minus 3, you got a point. At minus 4, you've got a point. Those are your two solutions. And also remember that that's 12. So that means 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Way up here, right? Okay, let's erase some of this stuff so you can actually see. Right? Way up there, you're going to have 12. That's going to be 12. And you got that from the standard form of the equation. So what is this going to look like? Well, wait a second. Count. 1, 2, 3 gives you 12. So from this, okay, you can go 1, 2, 3 and give you 12. And check this out. Whoop. There you go. Because of course, it's symmetrical about that point. Okay? So, beautiful. Now you got all kinds of wonderful things to play with. You got some accuracy, and now you even realize why we did all of that crazy factoring in grade 10. Oh my goodness. So stay tuned. We're going to do a lot more factoring. We'll get really, really used to PSA, and I'm going to show you how to solve all of this so that you can get some really pretty and accurate parabolas.